ਡਾਕਟਰ ਅਲੀ ਕਨਾਨੀ ਆਰਥੋਡੋਂਟਿਕਸ ਦੇ ਸਰਟੀਫਾਈਡ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲਿਸਟ ਹਨ। ਇਹ ਹਰ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀਆਂ ਡੈਂਟਲ ਤੇ ਫੇਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਇਰੈਗੂਲੈਰਿਟੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਜਾਂਚ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਲਾਜ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ ਤੇ ਰੋਕਥਾਮ ਦੇ ਤਰੀਕੇ ਦੱਸਦੇ ਹਨ। ਸਾਫ਼ ਸੁਥਰੇ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਤੇ ਲੇਟੈਸਟ ਮਸ਼ੀਨਸ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਬਜ਼ੁਰਗਾਂ ਤੱਕ ਦੀ ਟ੍ਰੀਟਮੈਂਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਂਦੀ ਹੈ। ਇਲਾਜ ਕਰਾਓ ਤੇ 에ਅਰ ਮਾਈਲਸ ਵੀ ਪਾਓ। ਕ੍ਰੀਏਟਿੰਗ ਬਿਊਟੀਫੁਲ ਸਮਾਈਲਸ। ਗਿਲਫਰਡ ਆਰਥੋਡੋਂਟਿਕ ਸੈਂਟਰ 604 599 2212 ਜਾਂ ਲੈਂਗਲੀ ਆਰਥੋਡੋਂਟਿਕਸ 604 533 6696।
ਪਿਛਲੇ 20 ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਇਮੀਗ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਲਾਅ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਕਟਿਸ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਮਾਰਕ ਐਂਡ ਕੰਪਨੀ ਲਾਅ ਕਾਰਪੋਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੀ ਸੇਵਾਵਾਂ ਪ੍ਰਦਾਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਨ। ਇਹ ਲਾਅ ਸੁਸਾਇਟੀ ਆਫ BC ਦੇ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਵੀ ਹਨ, ਜਿਸ ਕਾਰਨ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਧੋਖਾ ਹੋਣ ਦਾ ਸਵਾਲ ਹੀ ਪੈਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੁੰਦਾ।
मैं इसने दे हूँ, मैं पंजाबी हिंदी बोलती हाँ।
ਆਪਣੇ ਰਿਸ਼ਤੇਦਾਰਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਯਕੀਨਨ ਤੌਰ ਤੇ ਕੈਨੇਡਾ ਬੁਲਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਲਿੰਡਾ ਮਾਰਕ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰੋ।
Our commitment to you is our professional services with integrity and dedication.
ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਫੋਨ ਕਰੋ 604 588 9800। ਡਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਸੰਬੰਧ ਵਿੱਚ ਬ੍ਰੇਕ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਸਾਦੀਆ ਸਮੀਉੱਲਾ ਜੀ ਨੂੰ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਐਕਟਿਵਿਸਟ ਹਨ, ਤੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਬਿਮਾਰੀ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਕਾਫੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਅਸਰ ਸਾਡੇ ਸਮਾਜ ਵਿੱਚ ਅੱਜ ਦੇਖਿਆ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ, ਜਿਸ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਕਾਰਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ। ਔਰ ਇसी ਸਫ਼ਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਅੱਜ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਖਾਣ ਪੀਣ ਦੀ ਕਿੰਨੀ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਸ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ। ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਥ ਦੇਣਗੇ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਥਾਮਸ ਜੈਕਸਨ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਨਾਮਵਰ ਪ੍ਰੀਸਟ ਵੀ ਹਨ, ਅਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਇਹ ਖਾਣ ਪੀਣ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਜ਼ੋਰ ਬਹੁਤ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਜੋ ਕੁਝ ਵੀ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਪੈ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦਾ ਮੁੱਖ ਕਾਰਨ ਇਹ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਖਾ ਰਹੇ। ਸੋ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਕੋਈ ਜਾਣਕਾਰੀ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਹਾਊ ਇਜ਼ ਡਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਐਂਡ ਫੂਡ ਈਟਿੰਗ related and what should be kept in mind while we are eating food. Welcome to the program, doctor.
Thank you, Harpreet.
Thank you. So let's start off with the depression. When you have been roaming all across the world, meeting people, and with the stress, what we are finding that many of the people go into depression also.
That's right.
So what is the major reason for this? And apart from that, how eating, having a good lifestyle can have an impact on, kind of controlling depression?
Right. One other thing that's been definitely proven, there's an intimate relationship between the brain or the mind and the body.
Okay.
So when one is affected, the other sympathize with it.
Right.
So whatever takes place within the mental area of the whole body, it has a direct impact. And when we find ourselves under grief or remorse or guilt, it has a biochemical reaction within the body.
Right.
And therefore, it begins to affect every organ in our bodies. Stress is a cousin to depression.
Right.
So it can lead to it. And many times that stress breeds upon fear, anxiety, apprehension of the future, not able to face, situations in our lives because we have no resources. And there's a hopelessness,
Right.
despair. And many people either will find other avenues to deal with stress. They maybe become alcoholics, or they have comfort foods, or sometimes, I keep using this term, suicide.
Right.
Because they see no more reason for living. And so stressors are external factors
Right.
that will trigger these chemical reactions in the body, because we are built to deal with stress.
That's right.
We call it the fight or flight syndrome.
Right.
But stress is not so much the enemy, it's how we respond to it. And if we do not manage it constructively, then it leads into what we call depression,
Right.
and which that gets into a hopeless feeling. And so there's a definite relationship outside of the external in our emotions with foods we eat.
Right.
Because the response that stress brings into our lives and depression starts with the brain.
Brain, that's right.
There are responses, chemical responses. And there are certain chemical, what we call neurotransmitters. One is called serotonin.
Right.
Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that affects our behavior, our learning capacity. And when the brain is not receiving the uptake of serotonin, and then that adds more burden to the body of us dealing with depression.
Okay.
And one of the foods that is one of the elements that is what we call a precursor to serotonin. Case in point, you have within the food chain what we call amino acids.
Right.
You got the essential amino acids, you got those non-essential, that's what we got to receive in the food. So the precursor for serotonin is tryptophan.
Okay.
That is amino acid. And if you can imagine a chain from the ceiling on down, links, the tryptophan is the last link of the amino acid. It's the guy that just barely get on the bus.
Right.
And one of the things that I found that interferes with that tryptophan is more high protein and sugar.
Right.
When people eat a lot of high protein food, because the brain does not store protein. The brain thrives on what we call glucose.
Right.
That is the byproduct of metabolism from the potatoes, the cassava, or whatever the starches eat. So tryptophan, being an amino acid, comes from a protein, but what we need is not so much protein, we need more carbohydrates.
Okay.
And carbohydrates come in two forms. One is refined and one is unrefined.
Gee.
Case in point, white rice is a carbohydrate.
Right.
Brown rice is a carbohydrate. But white rice is a derivative of brown rice because we lose the fiber, we lose the bran, we lose the components
Right.
that is essential for the body to utilize. So what we need to do in dealing with depression, we need to be sure that our diet consists of high quality carbohydrate foods.
Okay.
That could be brown rice. There's some grains such as barley, millet, quinoa, spelt. We find that green leafy vegetables, another thing with folic acid, which is for the brain.
Right.
We have kale, bok choy, Brussels sprout, broccoli. And with any culture, you can find green, dark green leafy vegetables. That should be a part of the diet
Okay.
because the brain needs that. Essential fatty acids.
Okay.
Most people will eat fish for that, but there are other foods such as flax seeds come from the flax. We find that soy, there's another seed called chia seeds, C-H-I-A.
Right.
All of those are essential fatty acids that are necessary for the brain dealing with depression.
Okay.
And one other thing outside of food, but just like I'm drinking a little water here, you know, Harpreet, the brain is 80% water.
Yeah. That's right.
And when we are dehydrated, especially when dealing with depression, the body will compensate
Right.
by pulling water from its resources to make up the difference.
Right.
And one of the places that it would take water from is the brain.
Right.
We call that cerebrum dehydration. And that means that can end up with irritability, confusion, lack of concentration. So water is so essential.
Right.
And so I tell a person if they're measuring their body weight in pounds, they take their body weight and divide it by 2. So if I weighed 190 pounds, that's roughly give me, so I divide that by 2, was at 95 ounces. Then that's how many ounces I need to drink. Then I divide that by 8, give me the number of glasses.
Okay,
A glass of
every day.
water is something like 250 mils. So if I weigh 190 pounds, I need to be drinking something like probably 11 or 12 glasses of water a day
Okay.
just to deal with that. And finally, also, my thought is that when the blood sugar level drops in people, it affects. That means that if a person do not habitually eat breakfast in the morning, their chances of coping with depression is almost 20%.
Okay.
Because, like I said, the brain, because of a rapid metabolism, needs glucose.
Right.
It needs fuel. It's like you cannot drive a car without gasoline.
Yeah.
So breakfast is one of the most important meals of the day.
Right. And that is what we neglect most of the time.
Because we're busy, we
We are so
moving,
busy moving
and
around.
then we'll fuel up on a lot of sweets and donuts and things of this nature that sends our sugar level up through the ceiling,
Right.
and it peaks, then it drops. So now we got a fluctuating a sugar level, so we're snacking all the time, and the brain does not crave for food, it craves for nutrients.
Right.
And so breakfast, lunch, and light supper. And I believe as we deal with people emotionally or spiritually and feeding their body based on that principle, we have seen people overcome depression.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
If you could talk a little bit about this omegas, what we are hearing in the market
Yeah.
these days. There's a lot of talk about have more and more of omegas, omega-3 and
Omega-6,
in
omega-9.
the form of capsules or in the form
Yeah.
of fish oil.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What do you recommend about
Very
that?
quickly, go back to the fish, and again, that's a person's prerogative as they consume fish. But within the health industry, very little regulation. But however, they've done some study on what we call the North American Eskimos.
Right.
And they consume a lot of the fish
Yeah.
and the blubber because of the weather. And they said because of these folks do not have a buildup of arteriosclerosis, because remember, they live in a cold climate.
Right.
Blood is very thick, and the fact is their body become acclimated to that type of diet. But the lifespan of a North American Eskimo is only 40 years of age.
Right.
So they are not a criteria.
Right.
So if I'm going to deal with people who have lived a long time. There are a group of people called the Hunza and Koga farmers in Japan. They live to be 120.
Right.
But they live on almost a plant-based diet, and they use a little goat milk and et cetera. So omega-3, and when you say that, fish, it contains essential fatty acids. But what I'm looking at, and from a clinical and from a physiological, how the body utilizes these foods biochemically, the bioavailability. That means if I take in certain nutrients and capsules, can my body break it down and use it? So first of all, I'm not a capsule pushing person. That might be a place, but I believe the way God built the body is the fact we get it from the foods we eat. And plants contain those essential.
Everything, whatever is required, is based in the plants.
That's right.
Wonderful, sir. A pleasure having you. Thank
My
you very
pleasure
much
once
for
again.
that.
Thank you, Harpreet.
ਸੋ ਅੱਜ ਜੋ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਨਾਲ ਸੰਬੰਧਿਤ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਕਿਹਾ ਕਿ ਪਲਾਂਟ ਬੇਸਡ ਡਾਈਟ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਕਾਫੀ ਸਹਾਈ ਹੋ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਇਹੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਪਲਾਂਟ ਬੇਸਡ ਡਾਈਟ ਹੀ ਲਈ ਜਾਏ ਜਿਸ ਨਾਲ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਡਿਪਰੈਸ਼ਨ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੂਝ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ। ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਹੋਰ ਵੀ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਕਿ ਪਾਣੀ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਬਹੁਤ ਅਸੈਂਸ਼ੀਅਲ ਹੈ। ਇਸ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਨੇ ਅੱਜ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਹਦਾਇਤ ਇਹ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਪ੍ਰੀਚਰ ਵੀ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਸਾਰੀ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਐਜ਼ ਅ ਹੈਲਥ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲਿਸਟ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਇਹੀ ਰਿਕਮੈਂਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਮੀਟ ਘੱਟ ਤੋਂ ਘੱਟ ਖਾਓ ਤੇ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਤੋਂ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਆਪਣੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਡਾਈਟ ਹੈ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਲੀਫੀ ਵੈਜੀਟੇਬਲਸ ਨੂੰ ਇੰਟਰੋਡਿਊਸ ਕਰੋ।